You're listening to the Return Home podcast. Today we talk about our senses and how we make sense and give meaning, and how this process can be equally be in our service for well-being
Hello,
as
Eva,
much as
and
being in the
thank you
way.
for accepting the invitation to come back to our Ava Talks podcast series.
Hi, Alina. It's really beautiful to see you, and I'm looking forward to a good conversation.
We are definitely on our way to return home. And during our previous podcast, we discussed about different things and how different perspectives can impact us on our journey to come back to ourselves and what specifically we call home. And in this discussion, I would invite you to agree to pay some attention and some insights for our own awareness, and also those who are listening to us, about how we perceive different things in ourselves and our environment through our senses, through our five senses, and how these senses actually impact our lives through our meaning making, through the way we interpret what we perceive through our five senses. So I know it's a huge topic actually, but we are just opening these insights and these awarenesses so that one can better learn about the topic and experience these insights on their own. And we'll probably go deeper in our next conversations on this topic.
Yeah. Yeah, as you were saying, it's a great topic and it's a big topic. And actually, in the Satir work, we dedicated a whole big process, which is called family reconstruction process, to transformationally work on the meaning-making process. So that's a huge one. But I find it really helpful to generally talk about the connection point between taking in information through our senses and how those then get translated into our meaning-making process. So one example, I mean, to me, we always talk about the windows to the outside world as our five senses and how we take in information through the seeing, the hearing, the smelling, the tasting, the feeling. And then I find also our body sensations are taking in information. And obviously, this is shaping our perception. I mean, if I just take seeing, there is no seeing out there. Basically, we're just looking to the outside, and what I'm noticing is waves. And the waves I'm taking in is then translated into my inner way of translating those waves into images. So there is no picture out there. There is no seeing out there. I mean, I think that's another huge topic.
Yeah.
But we're using
how we perceive what we perceive.
Exactly. So we could talk about that in a different way. But I take an example from me grocery shopping yesterday. We have the rule today now that you have to wear a facial mask when you go into the supermarket. So adding to the distance we're holding, 2 meters, now the additional rule is to wear a facial mask when you go grocery shopping. And then there's an amount of people that can go grocery shopping at the same time. So people are counted. So we are actually having to use our senses. You know, there's the security guard who's saying, how many people are in here? Are you wearing a facial mask or not? Are you wearing it in the appropriate way? And that then gives a rule to, okay, this is the way to do it. And then you can proceed. I was wearing this facial mask inside like this for the first time. And I did notice that this experience had an impact on me. Not just on me, how I felt about myself, just me covering up most of my face, including my nose, had a strong impact on how I felt inside of my body. And that is translated through my sense, how I feel, but then what is the meaning making I make out of it? I think that's the bridge, that's the connection point. My meaning making was, oh my God, I'm feeling restricted of breathing. You know, there's tightness around my mouth. I feel restricted of breathing. I don't feel as free as usually. That's all meaning making. It's touching a core value of me, so it has an impact on how I feel in my body.
So it started with you noticing what you were feeling.
Yes.
And then starting to process and give it a meaning.
Exactly. So I notice, here's how I feel. This is what the feeling is on my face. And it restricts my breathing. My interpretation is I'm not feeling as free. And that is giving me a discomfort in my body. Second piece to it was I was looking around and I was seeing people being mostly covered up. I can't see most of their face. That visual had an impact on me, how much I felt connected or disconnected with others.
That was a second part when you perceived the environment and
yes.
the others around.
Exactly. I was looking outside.
How you were feeling.
Exactly. So one was my internal feeling. The other one was now I'm seeing everybody else. And it added to my discomfort in myself. I felt more disconnected. I felt I'm with people, but I didn't feel like I was really with people. Because usually I'm like shopping interacting with others and saying a little hello. And, you know, I do my little community thing. And it wasn't possible. I felt like a robot almost in my own body. Then I made a conscious choice. Is that it is what it is. So how can I, with the given restriction, with the feeling I have now, choose to use my freedom? So I started a conversation with the guy behind the cheese counter. And he was a pretty social guy. He actually kind of introduced it in a way, because he was kind of saying, oh, I'll be right back, and in a minute. And I don't know, he just presented a certain energy where I thought, oh, he's kind of open. And I think we started to crack a joke because it was hard to understand each other. It was almost like we're mumbling. So I couldn't really hear him. And so we're talking about cheeses and the homemade cream cheese, for example, where he said, oh, you want the homemade cream cheese? Oh, that's a true punishment for me to do homemade cream cheese, because I need to do it perfect, and chopping off the little onions and the paprika and all these different things is just a punishment for me. You know, my colleague, she can do it whatever way. If she's not attentive and is not in the mood of doing it, she just chops the onions big chunks. She doesn't care, but I can't do that. Here's another meaning making, right? He's saying, if I have to do the cream cheese grandma style, I have to do it this way, otherwise it's not good. So that's why it's a punishment for me to do it if I'm not in the mood for doing it. Right? So he gives me another example of meaning making, the grandma cheesecake, cream cheese style. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's not my thing. And that touches his whole perfectionism meaning making. It has to be perfect, it has to be a certain way. But coming back to our conversation, it actually started to open a little bit of a more freedom for me. So in the restriction, I felt, okay, now I can give this a new meaning, which is, there's a little bit of humor here. I cannot really hear you. You cannot really hear me. So we're making up some of the meaning making. So what am I hearing really? Is that what you said? And then it started to become a little bit more lighter. So my perception of myself, how I felt in my body, and how I felt in the situation started to change a little bit. But it was a choice point that changed from the way I see things, the way I feel, created a negative meaning making inside of me. And then I created a choice point to do something different actively on the outside, to use my senses and to update myself to a new way of engaging. And that gave me new meaning making. It wasn't optimum, but it was a change in how I felt about the situation. And it gave me a little bit more, I want to say more flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the connection ways of senses and meaning making.
Yeah, so that there are different stages in this process as you described it.
Yeah.
And the first one would be observing, seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, actually moving the attention toward the senses.
Yes.
And I also noticed with these requirements to wear masks and to keep the proper distance and wear gloves sometimes and all these things actually for me are like mindful practice.
Yeah.
Like I noticed that I'm a lot more aware of all these stages of movements, of places I go to, of actions I do, of how I relate to other people, how do I see things, how do I perceive things. And I don't think this is just me doing that. I've spoken to other people and they confirm that they are a lot more aware of what is going on around them and of their actions.
Yes.
Because a lot of the time, of the usual time, we are almost in trance. We do things automatically. We lock our door, we go out in the street, we do the shopping sometimes without even paying attention to the proper actions or the actual actions that we do. We are thinking about, I don't know, philosophical stuff in our minds, and not being aware and feeling and seeing and sensing everything that is around us.
Yeah, I can echo back what you were just saying. In an interesting way, the restriction allows to use our mindfulness, our sensory-based experiential skills more if I choose to. So, and that was something that happened for me. And one of the practices is now I'm aware that I see, and then I pick out something that I see in this moment in time. Or now I'm aware that I hear, and then I will check out what am I hearing as a sound or what's auditory in the moment in time. Now I'm aware that I feel. As you could listen to what my experience was, I was aware of what am I feeling. Now I'm aware I feel that, and I'm not diminishing it. I'm saying, yeah, that's true. That's what I'm feeling. And as I allowed myself to feel what I feel, I could also detect what I was creating as an interpretation of this feeling and how those connected. And then I was aware of, I could change that. I can, reorganize what I am seeing, hearing, tasting, feeling. And when I speak, I can tell you, I think the biggest impact for me was actually that I was smelling the cotton on my nose, and the cotton on my nose was the most trigger point that actually created then the negative interpretation and then the discomfort in my body. And so for me, probably the smell was the biggest point, and that's great to detect. So one exit strategy is I'm using my senses again to make sense in the here and the now, in the moment, and that will give me possibility to be a lot more awakened and mindful in the now. And that was, by the way, also one of my choice points. After the grocery shopping, I went outside because that's where you can take away the mask. I chose to do that. And then I went to the flower lady who's now doing window outside shopping. And interesting enough, she represents, age-wise, she represents one of the vulnerable groups, really. And we had a very vulnerable moment. I mean, I saw in her eyes, I was really seeing her right into her eyes, and she saw my eyes. And I think I felt we were connecting on sadness. And I said, "How are you doing today?" And she said, "I've been doing pretty well, but lately this all has an impact on me, how I emotionally connect. And you know, it gets to me." That's what she said, "It gets to me." And I said, "Yeah, I have a similar experience." And so we had a little bit of sharing, because now I was free with my mouth to communicate again, which is nice. So I used that sense of communication. And we had a very connecting moment. And then I bought intentionally a little plant, which was jasmine. And she said, "You would love the smell." And I said, "I really like the delicate little flowers. That's what attracted me to them. And I needed to look for something that will make me happy today, because I was touching, a sad place. And I wanted to make an attempt to take something home that's making me happy." And so I like the delicacy of the flowers. And she said, "Oh, they blossom beautiful. When they open, you're going to enjoy the smell." So here I have this conversation about getting out of the meaning making that wasn't helpful, and intuitively tuning back to my senses. I smell a nice smell, which is jasmine. I'm seeing this beautiful eyes of this beautiful warm woman, and it gives me a really good feeling about connection, which I was longing in the absence in the supermarket. And I went home and I felt a lot different, because I was choosing to use my senses in the here and now attentively to reorganize myself so that I could feel a lot better in my body. And as you can hear, the smell was the trigger for negative meaning making, and the smell of the jasmine flower and the connection with the lady was the exit point for me to shift my inner experience.
Yeah.
So one is mindfulness and one is old learning, and how we link them.
Mm-hmm. So choosing something in the environment and giving it a meaning, adding to the meaning it previously had, so enhancing its meaning.
Yes.
With the jasmine. So it enriches the experience and the awareness, and also becoming even a resource.
Yeah, and you know what I realized too was that the tender moment I experienced before actually brought me to the flower store in the neighborhood, where I'm usually not going, honestly speaking. I'm usually not going to that flower store. I'm usually going to my other neighborhood store. But this time I chose to go to her. So I was doing something new. And I felt I was really connecting with this woman. I'm living in this neighborhood the last 8 years. I never had this connecting moment with her as much as I did right now. So if I choose, I can make a discomfortable, negative meaning making, seemingly bad moment by choice to really use my senses in a different direction and create a new, fresh, uplifting moment that now creates a new meaning making, which is, I really like that new connection. And I wonder how I can nurture that connection a little bit more in the future.
It's interesting now, but an exercise comes to my mind as you were speaking, and I was hearing you about the story with the jasmine and the smell. And I'm a visual person, and I could see the the jasmine in my mind.
Yeah.
Because I don't have any flowers in my home at the moment. I projected your jasmine
Yes.
mentally inside my room, and imagined the smell of the jasmine, so it can be present in
Yes.
some way also inside my house. So
And that is where meaning making is serving us in our interests. I mean, now you're using the exact same capacity of automatically run meaning making in your interest by like, oh, I'm bringing the jasmine now into my home. I know what that smells like. I'm bringing it all together in my imagination, and so the exact same capacity that I can use to create a meaning making that is not very helpful for me, I can consciously use that to create a resource out of that, which is magical. So
I think it's a great capacity that our minds have to be able to connect to different resources and bring within our being and our body some states that otherwise would not be accessible on the spot.
yes.
So they say that the brain does not differentiate between what is real and what is imagined, and this is a double-edged sword.
It is.
A lot of times, or maybe all of the times, but as you said earlier, it's a point of choosing, and that makes really the difference if that is a resource or that is a great disadvantage for our minds.
And frankly saying, to carve out a choice point, I have to be willing to get to know myself, because how do I get a choice point is through awareness. I need to notice that this is going on in me. 95% of the time, things are running on automatic. Something happens and I don't even know what's going on. But as soon as I allow myself to take, and this time it was a trigger, so it does feel discomfortable. If I allow myself to be with a discomfortable feeling, to that be an entrance point to discover something about myself, learn about myself. And that's where meaning making comes in handy, because I need a language to myself. What the hell is going on in me? I need to have the bridge. So it's not just an overwhelming feeling, but I need to bridge the feeling to sense making in my own conversation to my own self. So the meaning making is a translation that I can understand in my own self what's going on. And if I understand it, if I have awakening consciousness around it, now I can choose to do the same, to do something different, to experiment, and that gives me more freedom. But I have to be willing to take the discomfortable invitation really as an invitation to then start to learn about myself. And that's where meaning making is our best friend. But it can sometimes also be a visitor that's uninvited, coming from the past and giving me an old experience or an old understanding that is now outdated. Because frankly, if I'm saying, I find this mask ridiculous, I'm not willing to do it, then I'm holding on to an outdated meaning making or an outdated decision in terms of my freedom. If I want to be free, I want to go grocery shopping without my mask. I can't, because it's a rule. So I really need to update that and be and it's easier if I allow it to be educated through my own inner experience, and then create a choice point of saying, okay, now this is what I can do new, and this is how I'm learning about myself and also about my own inner vulnerabilities, and how I can gradually update them with a new meaning making, meaning I reframe them. I'm giving them a new explanation. I'm giving them a new description. So the story I hold is different.
A meaning that is helpful rather than a meaning that goes on a downward spiral, like the same old pattern that keeps repeating. And in the given situation where there are strict things that need to be complied with, can be very, very, I don't know, overwhelming.
Yes. And I have to bring them in the present moment and update them with the environmental reality I am finding myself in. I cannot do the old. I really have to update it. I may have an experience. I give you another example. I may have an experience as a child that my meaning making was, if I'm a ballerina and I have a performance, the way I know my parents love me is when they show up at the performance. So I may project this meaning making out that love means the person who loves me will always show up at my events. Wow, if I hold up that meaning making and carry it forward, I may, be with my husband, I may be with my boyfriend, or I may be with a best friend. And my expectation now is the way you know how to love me, the way you can show me love is show up at all my performances. If you don't, then you don't love me.
So it becomes a criteria to
exactly. And then we have this whole script. And sometimes it's important to update the script.
The other ones don't even know about. So it's
exactly.
Only inside the mind. So.
Exactly. So either way, I have to share my script and say, listen, if you want to be in a relationship with me, you got to show up at all events. That's how I know you love me. Well, that may be challenging for me because I do a lot of events. So someone is going to be full-time busy. The other way may be that I will update by updating myself and saying, well, there are many ways to be loved. There are many ways to receive love. So this is an old, outdated interpretation. So the longing stays the same. I need to be loved and I want to be loved. But many different ways how people can show me that they love me and I can receive it. And that needs updating my story about knowing I'm valued and I'm loved to the present moment and make it a space of conversation and negotiation so that I can share what. And I can also negotiate myself with things, that's a little bit unrealistic. Maybe we should think about a different idea. And that would be also too much. I don't want you to follow me around all the time, so needs updates.
Yeah. Yeah. Eva, as we said at the beginning, this is a huge topic. And for sure we'll take it and develop it in the coming talks that we have. But for today, I think what we already discussed at least created some insights and some little bits of awareness about how a little bit of mindfulness, a little bit of attention to notice and to sense things around us first, and then seeing how we can reinterpret them and give them a meaning that is useful and empowering and helpful rather than going on the same old patterns, is useful for everyone listening.
Yeah, I agree.
And yeah,
I think in summarizing, we could probably say I would equally invite everybody to do 2 little practices. sensory-based practice, which is more creating mindfulness or using your senses specifically, is just take on this little experiment of 5 minutes of clock time or so to say, now I'm aware that I see. Now I'm aware that I hear. Now I'm aware that I feel. And you just fill in the dots of on these senses what you're noticing in the moment, in the here and now. And maybe you can even do that as a little inter-exchange practice with somebody else.
So first create the reference, the frame.
Yes, exactly. And so that would be using the senses. And the second exercise, or maybe more of an awareness and an illumination, I would invite you to check out more, is when you notice something happens on the outside and you feel triggered, allow yourself to notice what you feel in the moment. What do you feel? And then allow yourself to sit with the question, what I feel, what is the meaning making I make out of that? What is the interpretation? What's the story that comes to me? And as you notice that story, allow that story just to be there. Maybe take a pause and then allow to do something that will allow you to create a second story to the same experience. And if you have already created a second story, why not come up with a third story? So that you can bring those different interpretations next to each other and sense if that opens a new door in your inner experience. So this is how we can take the past experience to update it into the present, and then use the present through our senses to do more presencing. And those are the two ideas I like to give as a takeaway.
Yeah, thank you for these two very practical exercises that you shared with us now. And I think everyone can practice them at any time and any place, and they're sure very, very, very strong exercises and very creative at the same time. Thank you so very, very much for everything that you shared with us today, and in any given day actually. And looking forward to seeing you and hearing you next time.
Yeah, me too. I give you a hug, as you can see in my picture.
Hug back.
Great hugs to you. Thank you. Really lovely.